Before Disney would plant their feet in the European theme park market with Euro Disneyland in 1992, it wasn't uncommon to stumble across rides and sometimes even entire parks that generously helped themselves to inspiration from Disney's theme parks. It made sense. Disney wasn't around and they had already done the work in figuring out what guests wanted. Parks across the continent would take a ride or idea and bring them to Europe on a budget. Likewise, Disney could do very little about it, as their own rides used generic themes such as pirates or space, which could easily be copied with little problem. The history of these supposed rip-off rides gets messy rather quickly. Take the Alice ride at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Opening in 1962, you wouldn't be criticized for thinking that this is a rip-off of the popular Disneyland attraction. It features similar scenes and even an outdoor track section, with a ride system created by the same manufacturer that Disney used. But it's said that the park actually had permission from Walt Disney himself to use his version of the Lewis Carroll characters. Apparently, Walt did this as a favor, after they had helped him over the previous decade when he was researching theme park operations for his upcoming Disneyland. So, what was permitted? What was a loving homage? And what was a clear rip-off? Join us as we dive into what was once the Wild West of theme park copycat attractions. And a huge shout out to Daniel Cole over on our Patreon for the idea for this week's video. For exclusive content, including our adults-only Parks After Dark podcast, be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/ReviewTyme. Well regarded as one of the best theme parks in the world, winning Best Park in the Golden Ticket Awards for the last decade, Europa Park has an interesting history of taking inspiration from Disney. I mean, even their mascot is a large-eared mouse. Despite their modern reputation, it's hard to argue that in their early days, they didn't borrow many ideas from Disney, ranging from the subtle to the just plain overt. After Disney opened Space Mountain in 1975, the next couple of decades were filled with almost every theme park wanting a piece of the Space Mountain pie. Whether it was because an indoor coaster was a great way to make a space ride, or it was just a cheap way to theme a coaster, I'm not entirely sure about, but countless versions opened up around the world. In 1989, Europa Park opened up their own indoor space-themed coaster called Eurosat. But this didn't just borrow from Disney inside the ride. The outside of the ride also featured a strikingly familiar-looking geodesic sphere. Inside, after ascending the spiral lift hill, you were treated to the expected drops and turns, all while electro music was playing and lights and lasers were flashing. One of the most glaring copies of Disney, though, wasn't quite an entire ride, but direct scenes copied beat for beat in Europa Park's haunted house and, excuse my German here, Geisterschloss. The start of your experience feels eerily familiar, with a pre-show featuring a room that mysteriously stretches before being surprised by a hanging man. Next, you would step onto a constantly moving black carriage that would take you throughout the mansion. Inside, there are ballroom dancing ghosts and singing bus in a snowy graveyard. Though outside of these, shall we call them, loving homages, the ride is more in line with a traditional ghost train, featuring a collection of scenes containing spooky animatronics and set pieces. One of Europa Park's weirdest copies, though, was the Universum de Energy, a ride that showcased what Epcot's Universe of Energy would have been if it was purely the dinosaur part and didn't have a fossil fuel sponsorship. Aboard the Omni Mover ride system, you rolled through darkly lit scenes featuring some relatively impressive for the time dinosaur animatronics. The biggest and most interesting copy was Piraten en Batavia, or Pirates in Batavia. Rather than being set in the Caribbean, this water-based dark ride was set in Indonesia, but still featured a large number of familiar sights and sounds. As you floated through the experience, you would first see a fort battling a pirate ship, before heading further into the village to see pirates chasing women through a town that they would soon set fire to. You were also greeted by the absolutely iconic prison scene, where convicts were stuck whistling for a key held here by a monkey. See, it's a completely different scene to Disney's prison dog. And to top it all off, at the end of the ride you even floated past a restaurant, right at the water's edge. Europa Park wasn't the only one lovingly borrowing from Disney though. Far from it. Alton Towers also enjoyed the idea of a space-themed coaster, so they built their own called Black Hole, an off-the-shelf coaster model created by Schwarzkopf that was lightly space-themed, and originally set inside what can only be described as a giant circus tent. Phantasialand also had their own Space Mountain copy called Space Center, but this one may have been even cooler than the Disney version, featuring full-on animatronics throughout the ride and the queue. All around Europe, attractions clearly had Disney inspirations, such as Efteling's Carnival Festival and the countless, and I mean countless, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad type coasters, with the creator of Runaway Train at Chessington World of Adventure even admitting that it was a knockoff of Disney's Thunderous Mountain. Pirates' popularity was almost as widespread as a space coaster's was, from the subtle such as Fata Morgana at Efteling, which was inspired by Pirates of the Caribbean, all the way to Drayton Manor's Pirate Adventure, which contained entire scenes copied from the Disney classic. We could honestly sit here all day pointing out rides that in some way took inspiration from Disney. But today, things are quite different in the European theme park scene. Almost every ride we've talked about so far in this video is now either closed or completely revamped. The 20th century era where European theme parks were lovingly borrowing from Disney seems to mostly be over. Disney now has their own skin in the game with Disneyland Paris. So if you can't make something as good as Disney, make something completely different. In 2018, Universum der Energie became Madame Freudenreich's Curiosities, a ride that cleverly reused the same dinosaur animatronics to now tell a very normal story about an elderly lady who collects all types of things, including dinosaurs. Also that same year, Eurosat became Eurosat Can Coaster, which although still placed inside a geodesic sphere, now has nothing to do with space travel, and is instead themed after the famous Moulin Rouge. One of the largest changes was to Piraten in Batavia. In 2018, a fire tore through part of Europa Park, destroying the original ride. However, rather than leaving the ride removed, the park embarked on a journey to bring it back, better than ever. The designer of the new version specifically noted that the original was an homage to Pirates of the Caribbean, and that they didn't want to copy that again. The new version features a completely new and original storyline, huge and impressive set pieces, and moments that are even better than what Disney offers in their classic pirate rides. All of which is even more impressive when you realize this ride reopened only 2 years after the original burnt down. Other rides around Europe, such as the trackless dark ride Symbolica at Efteling, are similarly classic Disney-esque attractions, done in ways better than Disney would do today. Of course, there is an elephant in the room we haven't mentioned, and that's that Walt Disney himself took inspiration when constructing Disneyland. Inspiration from European theme parks. Walt visited Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, and he scribbled down notes about the seats, gardens, rides, food, and everything else. It was specifically referenced that he loved the park's atmosphere and mood, being completely different from the Carney-ran sideshows he saw in the US. Tivoli had lush flowers, tame rides everyone could enjoy together, and a festive, family-friendly atmosphere. 3 things that could definitely be said about Walt's Family Fun Park. In the past, European theme parks borrowed from Disney as a way to bring a Disney-like experience to the locals. But now, European parks don't need to do that. They can stand on their own, and we're almost in a renaissance of European theme parks, with more and more exciting attractions coming yearly, and older rides being renovated and replaced by groundbreaking new attractions. But over to you. Have you ridden any of these weird Disney copycat rides? And if so, how was it? Let us know down below. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke. Thanks for watching.